Welcome to the Pit Check, your weekly news for the best and heaviest new albums from your favorite extreme metal and hardcore bands. This week, we've got a great variety pack of genres. We've got some hardcore, some mathcore, some metalcore and deathcore, some slam, and a literal dump truck full of death metal. Whether it's brutal, old school, or melodic, death metal lovers are eating good this week. So as always, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that way you can stay up to date on all of the best music every single week. And let's get right into this week's best new albums.
Come down, boy, if you've a taste for cold steel.
The Florida-based hardcore thrash band Cold Steel have released their debut album titled Discipline and Punish. Dude, this band rips. If you love old school death metal, thrash metal, and just some aggressive as hell hardcore, stop what you're doing and put this album on. I'm gonna try to not just gas up this band for like 2 minutes straight, but it's gonna be hard. This has some of the most nostalgic and satisfying guitar riffs and grooves, but without ever feeling dated. It gives you that classic death metal backbone, but then fleshed out with these thrash and modern hardcore and even beatdown hardcore influences that build a Frankensteinian union between past and present. And collaborations with bands like Two Piece or vocalists like Aaron Hurd really show their willingness to experiment. And the overall sound of this album is so gritty and crunchy. Arthur Risk and Matt Heafy of Trivium produced this album perfectly. Want to fill the void every time I die left behind? The New York-based mathy hardcore band Bore has released their debut album titled Feral. I love this band's creative blending of mathcore, hardcore, and metalcore with a lot of these kind of southern and abrasive riffs. And the band themselves explicitly says they pay homage to Converge, Every Time I Die, and Botch, as well as including more offbeat inspirations like Mr. Bungle and Explosions in the Sky and even At the Drive-In. I really like this mix of aggression and nihilism. This band wanted to, quote, make something you can stage dive and two-step to, but could also zone out to. And that blending of this dark and self-destructive and meaningful lyricism with this up-tempo and driving energy will immediately make you realize why this album is called Feral. I loved this album. It absolutely scratches that dark mathcore itch, which has been kind of missing from the scene lately. And with this record actually being recorded close to 3 years ago, and only recently now being released from production hell, I'm stoked this band is tearing onto the scene, and hopefully we won't have to wait for any more delays. Feeling drained. The California hardcore band Drain is back with this highly anticipated new album titled Is Your Friend. Whenever hardcore bands get too big, it's always going to be a concern that this next album is going to be too light or maybe have too much radio rock in it, but thank God that is not a problem with this band. And I have to point out how good the bass is on this album, and has so many beefy grooves that it'll get even the most legless person out there two-stepping. Bass never gets enough credit, and these guitars are hitting these classic hardcore punk riffs and solos, as well as some of the most brass-knuckle breakdowns of their career. I am so stoked on how good this album is. Let's be real, a band like this could have gotten away with being so much more generic and not really face too much blowback, but instead, Drain decided to show off their songwriting and creativity and precision. This is 10 songs and every single one of them is sick. There's not a second of wasted time on this album.
From tomorrow, feel the love of the whole.
Ah, the Oregon The Massachusetts-based brutal death metal band Dysentery is back after 10 years with their latest album, titled Dejection, Chrysalis. It may have taken a decade, but it may have been worth it. This is some top-tier brutal death metal. Dysentery is bringing back that true early 2000s slam sound, teaching these MySpace slam revival kids how it's really done. I love how dark and nasty their sound is. This is one of those albums that just feels grimy, but in the best way possible. It doesn't need to go over the top with references or jokes or silly one-liners to try and hook you in. They know that their sheer punishing brutality is enough to suck you in and grind you to a pulp. I love when older bands come out of nowhere and kick a ton of ass. If you love your brutal death metal and slam to be taken a little bit more seriously, but also being stupidly heavy, definitely give this one a shot. Was the Doom soundtrack not heavy enough for you? The Chicago-based progressive deathgroove band HIVE has released their sophomore album titled Conduct of Flies. I really dig how bouncy and groovy and progressive this album is, with HIVE saying that the band lives somewhere in that weird space where groovy deathcore, gent, and thal collide. And of course, some of the standout elements here are these argent metal and industrial electronic melodies that saturate this entire album. It gives such a driving force and shot of adrenaline to every single song. But I love that they do it in a way that doesn't cheapen the riffs or breakdowns just for these electronic elements. The guitars especially are going crazy, even if it's a lot more subtle than you might expect. No. The British mathcore band Pupil Slicer is back with their latest album titled Fleshwork. What this band lacks in members, they make up for in passion. These three psychopaths have somehow gotten better and better with each album, which I genuinely thought was impossible after their fantastic 2023 album, Blossom. Every element that I loved about their previous releases has been pushed to the next level. The bits of shoegaze and gent and black metal are even more refined than before. And of course, they could never lose that grating and chaotic mathcore spine, complete with tons of tempo and time signature changes, and of course, tons of panic chords. But this time around, I'm loving how they're leaning more into these down-tempo and sludgy elements. This is such an interesting and fascinating new album. You never know where it's gonna go next. If you hate when an album starts to sound too samey or kind of blend together into one long song, then definitely check this one out. This band can barely get through one song sounding the same. Does your slam need more brain rot?
This is slam music, bitch.
The stupidly heavy white boy slam band Infectious Jelqing are back with their latest EP titled Nuclear Slam Division. If you love when your slam has a lower IQ than the temperature outside, this EP is for you.
Divorced dad music.
Where a lot of similar slam bands will just use like MP3 files of samples and memes, Infectious Jelqing was actually smart enough to team up with a DJ Smokey, to produce and incorporate all of these hip-hop elements. There's all of these 808s and bass drops and even producer tags that are talking shit. No one else is leaning this heavy into that dirty south and electronic kind of production while being stupidly heavy and genuinely fun to listen to. They're kind of turning into a slam infinite annihilator. A lot of similar bands can come off kind of cheap or low effort, or just using basic FL Studio plugins, but thankfully that is not the case here. For an album that is as ignorant and brain dead as this one, the ingenuity is off the charts. It's nasty, abrasive, and dumb as hell, but that's what I love about it.
How you like that, bitch?
Can you use it in a sentence? This album has an Omnium Gatherum of riffs. The Finnish melodic death metal band Omnium Gatherum has released their 10th studio album titled May the Bridges We Burn Light the Way. If guitar work gets you off balance, then this album is gonna give you vertigo. The guitars here are absolutely gorgeous. The melodies and riffs are hauntingly beautiful, and each song takes you on some crazy journey to Valhalla. This is what 30 years of honing your craft sounds like. If you're into Melodeath at all, you're gonna wanna check this one out. This album is more of their classic style, which is that Gothenburg melodic death metal mixed with a decent amount of progressive metal and even some like old school power metal. If you're over 45, I bet this album is like a well-prepared comfort food. It's not gonna reinvent the wheel, but it just hits right. And now here is the entire list of all of the metal and hardcore albums that came out this week. There's a ton of good stuff that of course we could not get to today. Absolutely check out Alexis on Fire. But it's not an album of new songs, it's a cover album, which is why I didn't include it today. Also, Glorious Depravity is so good. It's some nasty, groovy, brutal death metal. I had to cut it from the script for time, and also because this list would have been like 90% death metal, but still, it's so good, and if you need more death metal, check out Glorious Depravity. World Condemned also has a really fun new EP. It's some very raw and rough around the edges hardcore with a sick feature from Earth Crisis. Yeah, there's just a lot of good stuff this week. I mean, check out anything that sounds good or leave a comment below if there was anything I missed. And of course, if you have a band or an album coming out, feel free to DM me on any of my socials or leave some links below for everyone in the comments to come check it out. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me every single week for these new album roundups, and I'll catch you next week for next week's best new albums.